Dracula is a new adaptation of the Bram Stoker classic Gothic horror novel. It was actually made in 2025, but has just come on Amazon Prime this year. And last year, I watched Nosferatu, the remake of a remake of the German dark expressionist horror classic, which was itself actually an adaptation of Dracula, but without the nitty gritty of all the annoying intellectual property rights. Starts off with a lot of exposition about Dracula and his wife Elisabetta and their passionate love affair. Lots of shots of them being playful, being romantic, being hypersexual, and then he gets taken off to battle. Now, for some reason, she has to go somewhere else, out of the safety of the castle where she lives, on a long journey through some dangerous woods to get to somewhere apparently that's safer. For some reason, she looks exactly like Count Elizabeth Bathory, the woman who's often seen as one of the world's most famous serial killers. I don't know if that was deliberate, but it was certainly there. In the process, she gets ambushed. Dracula finds out she's being ambushed somehow, and then he goes after her, somehow finds her, but she's actually killed in the process of her rescue. This is where he renounces his belief in God, and this somehow makes him immortal. We then go to an asylum in Paris, where a priest, who's just called a priest, played by Christoph Waltz, visits a woman who's in a special cell. He identifies her as being a vampire who's a slave to some master. And apparently the priest knows exactly who this is. He's from an organisation in the Catholic Church that particularly looks for vampires. And he knows that she's looking for the reincarnation of Elisabetta. We then go back to Transylvania, and Jonathan Harker arrives at the castle of Dracula. We then get more exposition as, after breaking some house rule, Harker is chained up, and Dracula reveals his secret. The secret being that he has been alive for hundreds of years, and we get this long exposition of his centuries looking for the reincarnation of Elisabetta. He gets possession of some magic perfume which renders everyone under his spell. Get a big montage of various different ballrooms where Dracula, wearing the perfume, is somehow manages to get people to do large formation dance routines for some reason. Eventually, at the Palace of Versailles, he realizes that he's getting it all wrong, and he decides to go a little bit mad, and he goes on a big spree of biting women in the ballroom and converting them to be his slaves, one of them being Maria. After the exposition and threatening to execute Harker, Harker begs for his life and shows him a locket with the picture of his fiancée, Mina. Dracula recognizes her as the reincarnation of Elisabetta, and he decides to go to London, keeping Harker locked up. Harker manages to escape and makes his way to London. In London, Dracula frees Maria from the asylum. Somehow he knew she was there. Mina then manages to introduce Dracula to Mina, and we get a montage of them spending time together. Not immediately falling in love, but eventually he manages to convince her that she is the reincarnation of Elisabetta thanks to some very convenient psychic connection. Harker gets back to London, and at this time we find that Mina and Dracula are heading back to Transylvania. And so he, the priest, the doctor from the asylum, they head straight immediately to Transylvania. In Transylvania, Mina is reintroduced to her life in the castle, but then a small army shows up with the priest and Harker and others. There's a big raid on the castle, and the priest eventually convinces Dracula that he needs to sacrifice himself to save Elisabetta. The end. And that's it. How would I describe this film? Well, disappointing. There is zero atmosphere, and there is absolutely zero menace. Nosferatu from last year, or the year before technically, was very menacing and very dark and very brooding. It managed to do this without any kind of jump scares, just lots and lots of atmosphere and lighting and cinematography. That was very good. This has massive amounts of exposition at the start. It could have easily been cut down. All the stuff with Elisabetta and Dracula first, with the playfulness, the romance, the sex, could have been done in a couple of short interactions. We didn't need to know how much they're in love. We didn't need to be shown it because we could have assumed it very easily. There's this whole thing about the perfume. Still not sure what the point of the perfume was. This whole thing with the formation dancing in the ballrooms, I don't understand what it was supposed to signify other than Dracula could control people with this perfume. But somehow that was controlling all the men, whereas they're supposed to attract the women, or at least attract Mina, so I don't get what it was for. Also, it only worked in the immediate vicinity, so somehow he had to be certain that he was in the right place to meet her. How he would know that, I don't know. When Dracula is telling his story to Harker, Harker doesn't find it weird at all, which in itself is weird. And then there was the awful scene in a convent where the aged and disfigured Dracula needs human blood to revive himself. And he uses his perfume to get the nuns fighting over themselves to get near him and sacrifice himself to him. They form this weird kind of pyramid pushing him up in some sort of messianic, Jesus-like way, I don't know. It looks stupid. It's completely pointless. It looks like it's an attempt to do some sort of stylizing, and it just falls flat. It looks incredibly cartoonish. Mina's conversion to believe that she's the reincarnation of Elisabetta is so quick. There's no real resistance to it. It's convenient with this psychic connection they have. In Nosferatu, the bulk of the film is his attempt to persuade her, whereas this is just a few quick scenes and she's a believer. And then of course there's the dumbest bit at the end in the castle when the priest and Harker and other people show up with a small army. Whose army? Where did this army come from? Why are they there? Ultimately, we're talking about one kidnapped foreign woman. Why would an army storm a castle of some weird local prince to rescue some foreign woman they don't know? What's in it for them? How did they persuade the government of this country to give these random people a unit of troops and with cannon to sacrifice their lives raiding a castle? Why would they even need to think about doing that? What did they think the danger was in this castle? There are these gargoyles as well who help Dracula. They look absolutely dreadful, some of the dumbest CGI I've seen in years. But it turns out at the end when Dracula is dead and the spells will be broken that they are actually children. They've been cursed and converted. We don't see how, we don't know why, but apparently that's what it is. Why? Where did that come from? Now, I've never read the book Dracula, and I've never seen any of the other adaptations, so I don't know what's come from the books and what's come from other films or what's completely made up. So, in a way, I'm in a good position because I don't have that bias. So I may be slagging off the original book for all I know. But it just, some of these things just seem really, really dumb. So Dracula was played by Caleb Landry, and his performance is just very, very derivative and really annoying. He's trying to be really deep and meaningful and passionate while also being kind of surrealist, and it just comes across as incredibly annoying and insufferable. Christoph Waltz plays a priest, and he's fine. This is a role that hasn't challenged him in any way, shape or form. He's not even a particularly classic Christoph Waltz either. It's just, And the rest of the cast, kind of non-entities. Even the woman plays Maria. An actress named Matilda De Angelis. She's a little bit hammy, but she's also kind of a non-entity like all of them. Jonathan Harker, especially a non-entity. This film completely lacks any atmosphere, any tension, any style, any characters that I can empathise with. And even the plot is unbelievable. And I know that it's a plot about a vampire that has been alive for hundreds of years, but there are still things that need to make sense, like the recruiting of an army. And this just doesn't fit. I'm not saying it's an awful film. Not at all. This is a film. It's not bad. It's not good. It's just nothing. It's a very easy watch, but it's not something you ever really care about. It's fine. Wouldn't recommend it, but I wouldn't deter anyone from watching it either. So if you want 2 hours of an easy watch, then yeah, why not?